Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a technology so foundational, it literally defined how we process information, organize our politics, and see the world. We're talking about the revolutionary impact of print culture.
That's right. Our mission today is to trace this whole journey. We're going back, almost 2 millennia, to track the development of printing from its earliest origins in Asia, right through the technical breakthroughs in Europe.
And exploring how this one invention basically created the modern, informed, and let's be honest, often argumentative world we live in.
Exactly. Our sources cover everything from, the nitty-gritty technical history to some really deep cultural analysis, giving you a shortcut to being instantly well-informed.
And here's the core paradox we need to solve for you. We are drowning in text, digital, physical, it's everywhere. But we so rarely stop to imagine the age before this, where knowledge was handwritten, fragile, and just intensely scarce.
To understand today's information overload, you have to start at the beginning.
Okay, let's unpack this journey, starting where the technology itself originated. East Asia.
Indeed. The very first technology we'd call print developed in China, Japan, and Korea. This was hand printing using inked wood blocks starting way back around AD 594 in China.
And what role did paper play in this? I understand the Chinese had already invented this unique kind of thin, porous paper that was essential for this to even work, right?
Precisely. The paper's technical demands actually dictated the physical form of the book itself, because that thin paper you couldn't print on both sides.
Ah, so that's why you get the traditional Chinese accordion book.
Exactly. The sheets were folded and stitched at the side, and the resulting craftsmanship was just superb. It could duplicate the look of professional calligraphy with really remarkable accuracy.
And what's fascinating here is that the initial driver for all this printing, it wasn't popular literature or religion, but the imperial state itself. Why was the government the first big customer?
It was really an act of centralized control, of bureaucratic efficiency. The imperial system relied on this huge civil service recruited through these really tough examinations.
So they needed textbooks.
Textbooks in vast numbers. By printing them under state sponsorship, the state achieved two massive goals. First, they guaranteed a reliable supply of skilled administrators. But second, and this is maybe more crucial, they created the first standardized knowledge base at scale. It ensured every official and every candidate studied the exact same version of the official truth.
That's a powerful idea, standardization as a form of state power.
Yeah.
But by the 17th century, that power began to fragment a bit as urban culture bloomed.
That's when print really democratized. Merchants started using print to collect trade information. Reading transformed from this, strictly scholarly pursuit into a legitimate leisure activity.
And new types of literature popped up.
Yes, fiction, poetry, romantic plays, all sorts of things.
And we see a huge expansion of who's reading, especially women. Wives of scholar officials, even courtesans, they began publishing their own poetry and plays. That's a major cultural shift.
And this technology, it spread. Buddhist missionaries took hand printing into Japan around AD 768. Books became cheap, abundant. The oldest printed Japanese book, the Diamond Sutra, is from AD 868.
And Japan gives us that amazing intersection of print and visual culture, right? The ukiyo, the pictures of the floating world.
Yes, those incredible, colorful prints of courtesans and tea house gatherings in Edo, which is now Tokyo. It just shows how adaptable the technology was, not just for text, but for mass market art.
The kind that later influenced artists like Van Gogh.
The very same. And we should quickly mention Korea's technical significance, home to the Tripitaka Koreana, which is 80,000 woodblocks of scripture, and the Jikchi, one of the world's oldest books printed with movable metal type from the late 14th century.
So we have 1,000 years of established print culture in East Asia. But despite this huge head start, why did the real explosion of print only happen when the technology finally reached Europe?
Well, the first component, paper, got there first. It arrived via the Silk Route in the 11th century. And this was essential because European manuscripts were still mostly being written on expensive vellum.
Animal skin, basically.
Right, parchment from animal skin. So laborious.
And the woodblock tech itself was brought back to Italy by Marco Polo in 1295. But even with paper and woodblocks, Europe was facing this massive information bottleneck. They just couldn't keep up with demand.
Manuscript production was just too slow, too expensive. It was limited by the speed of a human hand. Demand was surging, especially from university towns. Sources tell us over 50 scribes sometimes worked for just one bookseller.
50. just to keep pace. And there was this cultural divide too, right? Not everyone was excited about mass-produced
No,
knowledge.
not at all. Aristocratic circles, rich monasteries, they still preferred their luxury handwritten editions.
Hmm.
They actively scoffed at printed books, called them cheap vulgarities.
It sounds like the 15th century version of collecting vinyl versus streaming music. It's about status, not just content.
That's a great analogy. But merchants and students, they didn't care about status. They just needed access and speed. And that demand set the stage for one man to solve the technical puzzle.
Johann Gutenberg.
That's the man.
It seems incredible that a goldsmith was the one to unlock this whole revolution. Gutenberg, in Strasbourg in the 1430s, how did his metalwork expertise provide the missing link?
Well, Gutenberg's genius was in combining existing technologies. He adapted the screw and pressure system of, believe it or not, the olive press for the printing press. But the real breakthrough came from his goldsmith background.
Which was creating standardized, identical, and rapidly reproducible pieces of type.
Exactly. He needed metal type, but it had to be consistent. So he adapted the lead molds used for casting trinkets and perfected this adjustable hand mold system. This let him pour molten lead into a mold to instantly cast a perfect interchangeable letter.
Which you just couldn't do efficiently with woodblocks for European alphabets.
Not a chance. He perfected this system by 1348, and the first mass-produced book, the Bible, well, it took 3 years, but they made 180 copies. That speed was just astronomical for the time.
And you see that fascinating transition where the new printed book tried to imitate the old manuscript?
Yes. The metal type was designed to mimic this beautiful, handwritten calligraphy. And for wealthy buyers, they'd leave blank spaces on the page.
So they could hire an artist later to hand paint the borders with illustrations. It was machine production, but with the bespoke status of a manuscript.
A lack of uniformity the elite preferred. But that resistance was futile. Between 1450 and 1550, book production just exploded. Traveling German printers set up presses across Europe.
And the numbers are staggering.
They are. Book production went from an estimated 20 million copies to an estimated 200 million copies in the 16th century. That tenfold increase. That is the print revolution.
So this boom immediately creates a new kind of public. Let's talk about the shift from a hearing public to a reading public.
In the preprint world, knowledge was communal. You went to the village square or the church to hear texts read aloud by an interpreter. Print transferred knowledge from the public square to the private home.
And the profound consequence of that shift to private individual reading is
It allows for private critique. The individual now has a permanent copy of the text. They can read it, reread it, cross-reference it, and think critically without relying on a public interpreter.
this capacity for internalized, self-directed thought. That's one of the biggest and maybe quietest consequences of the whole revolution.
Absolutely. Even though literacy was still growing, printers blurred that line. They'd publish illustrated popular tales that were meant to be read aloud for people who were still illiterate.
But the political and religious consequences were immediate. I mean, print provided a physical infrastructure for dissent.
He really did. In 1517, Martin Luther wrote his 95 Theses, criticizing the church, and they were instantly reproduced and circulated everywhere. It basically sparked the Protestant Reformation.
Luther himself called print the ultimate gift of God. The authorities, though, they didn't see it that way. The fear of print was born almost immediately.
The fear was that uncontrolled print would lead to rebellious and irreligious thoughts. And this brings us to an insight that connects, directly to the present day.
The glut of information.
Precisely. The Latin scholar Erasmus, as early as 1508, was expressing this deep anxiety about the swarms of new books causing a glut. He feared the spread of stupid, ignorant, slanderous, seditious books.
So the very first generation dealing with mass information felt exactly what we feel today. This panic that the sheer volume of stuff would destroy the value of good information.
And that panic led to action. The Roman Catholic Church established the Inquisition and began to maintain the index of prohibited books from 1558 onward, trying desperately to control what people could read.
But despite that, the reading public just kept growing right into what they called the reading mania.
Literacy rates climbed dramatically through the 17th and 18th centuries, reaching 60 to 80% in some parts of Europe, largely because of schools set up by churches.
And printers responded with cheap, accessible formats.
You had the English penny chapbooks sold by peddlers and the French Bibliothèque Bleue, the first true mass-market paperbacks, with their cheap blue covers priced for the poor.
And this mass accessibility was the engine for the Enlightenment. Print spread the ideas of thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau, who were demanding that everything be judged by reason, not just by tradition.
which fundamentally eroded the legitimacy of the old social order.
This connects directly to the French Revolution. How do historians link print culture to that seismic event?
Well, there are three main arguments. First, print popularized those Enlightenment ideas, providing a critique of despotism. Second, it created a new culture of critical dialogue and public debate.
And the third, which really speaks to the power of media today, is the mass circulation of mockery.
That's right. By the 1780s, there was this flood of mocking literature, cartoons, caricatures, all criticizing the royalty, suggesting the monarchy was just absorbed in pleasure while the people suffered.
So these were the first mass market political memes, a way to undermine authority with humor and repetition, completely eroding the monarchy's moral standing.
Exactly. Then, in the 19th century, the revolution matured and found new audiences. Compulsory education turned children into a new readership. A children's press developed in France in 1857.
And women became crucial as both readers and writers.
Absolutely. Penny magazines were marketed directly to women. And as novels became the dominant literary form, women like Jane Austen, the Brontes, George Eliot, they became huge, defining this new type of determined woman.
And print became an engine for self-improvement for the working classes.
Lending libraries in England were essential for educating artisans and the lower middle class. We have this one anecdote about Thomas Wood, a mechanic in Yorkshire.
Oh, right.
He rented old newspapers and read them by firelight because he couldn't even afford candles. And these self-educated workers, they started writing political tracts and autobiographies in huge numbers.
Okay, we need to talk speed now. The technical innovations of the late 19th century. What was the impact of something like Richard M. Howe's power-driven cylindrical press?
Oh, that was the game changer for scale. Howe's press could print 8,000 sheets an hour. This wasn't just about faster books. It was about making the modern daily newspaper possible. It made commercial advertising at scale feasible for the very first time.
So it binds commerce and communication together forever.
And that pace just accelerated with the offset press, electric presses, and modern marketing strategies in the 20th century. Serialized novels, cheap paperbacks during the Great Depression to keep people buying.
A fully modern global print ecosystem was born. Let's pivot to wrap up by looking at India. Before the press arrived, India had this ancient tradition of handwritten manuscripts on fragile palm leaves.
A tradition that was highly exclusive. The manuscripts were expensive, fragile, not widely used. Students often learned just by memorizing texts dictated to them. They didn't have their own personal books.
So when does the press finally arrive, and who brings it?
It arrives first in Goa, brought by Portuguese missionaries in the mid-16th century. So the early press in India was driven almost entirely by religious efforts. Catholic priests printed tracts in Konkani, the first Tamil book in 1579, the first Malayalam book in 1713.
So a foreign religious effort actually provided the push for printing in local Indian languages. What about the English press?
That developed slower and was more commercially motivated. It started later through private English enterprise, like James Augustus Hickey's Bengal Gazette in 1780, which really set the stage for modern journalism there.
That brings us to the end of this deep dive. I mean, look at the scale of this transformation. A technology developed for imperial bureaucracy in China becomes the single most powerful tool for religious reform, political revolution, and mass enlightenment across the globe.
The ultimate takeaway here is that print didn't just disseminate information. It fundamentally altered how we think. It forced a critical dialogue. Because you could now read the church's propaganda, but you could also read Voltaire or Luther in the privacy of your own home.
This ability to accept, reject, or reinterpret ideas for yourself, that's the lasting legacy.
It is.
And that critical function brings us right back to the present. We mentioned Erasmus's panic in 1508 about the satiety and glut of new books, the fear that sheer volume would drown out good information.
A very, very modern fear in a world of endless digital feeds.
So here's the thought for you. If the original print revolution created a new public sphere for debate by making information abundant and permanent, what specific tools, whether they're technical or intellectual, are needed today to navigate the digital glut and continue that tradition of critical reasoning? Something to consider as you scroll through your daily feeds. That's it for this deep dive. Thank you for letting us guide you through the source material. We'll see you next time.